Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Betwixt the Books, where today we will be talking about a book that we technically read for last year's reading challenge. It was our second chance book last year, and that is Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson. Now, we talked about this in our wrap-up, talking about our Buddy Reads reading challenge, but in case you didn't see that video, one of the challenges that we set for the books that we read together and review for you together was to read a second chance book or a book where we have read something previously from the same author and we're kind of ambivalent towards, weren't super fans, but saw promise in. And if you're wondering, we've never heard you talk about Margaret Rogerson before. We read Sorcery of Thorns actually for Bibliomancy for Beginners a couple years ago. We never did a video on it, partially because when we read that one, all of our thoughts were like, it was okay, like it was fine, it was a YA fantasy book. We didn't have very many thoughts at all, so there never actually was a review of it because we didn't have enough to talk about to do a review. So it felt like a good choice for this, of like something that we had seen something positive from, but wasn't 100% there. Like, here's a new book from this author, did they improve? Did they change the things that we didn't like? Did it get worse? What sort of happened here? And for sure, this is a good choice for that because all of the things that we had issues with Sorcery of Thorns were addressed here. All of the things that we liked in Sorcery of Thorns were here and actually improved upon, but we're going to go into that and talk about Vespertine specifically today.
So not only did this book have some callbacks to Sorcery of Thorns, it also had some interesting things to say in conversation with a book that we reviewed last year, which was a standalone YA fantasy called Year of the Reaper by Michaela. You can go ahead and see our joint review of that for more, but if you enjoyed that book, you would enjoy this book, or vice versa. So read-alikes immediately being offered. If you are interested what the actual Vespertine book is about, it follows the story of Artemisia, who is a nun in training at a convent in a world in which if the dead are not taken care of properly, they will become evil spirits essentially. And there's a whole kind of hierarchy of like the way you die, the kind of spirit you become, how dangerous you are, what your powers are. And so it's very important that the Grey Nuns of Artemisia's convent, all of the dead come to them and they need to be taken care of. There are this special order of old spirits called Revenants, and there is like 7 of them. They're a really big deal, they're really powerful, really scary. And basically the plot of this book is things go all to heck and Artemisia ends up being the Vespertine or carrier of a very powerful Revenant spirit. Shenanigans ensue. Some people think she's a saint, some people think she wants to destroy the world. She uncovers a plot to actually destroy the world. Other people think it's her fault, she thinks it's someone else's fault. Things blow up, people die. The Revenant is my favorite character. I forgot Artemisia's name because the entire time he just calls her Nun, except for like one emotional moment where he calls her Artemisia. And that just tells you where my entire focus was of this book. For my overall review of Vespertine, I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I think I gave Sorcery of Thorns like 3, maybe 3.5, but 3 stars. The definite improvement on Sorcery of Thorns. Really enjoyed this one. There's a lot of elements in this that I like, including a morally gray character in the Revenant. I always love when that is explored. There's themes that come back in this one and the other one of like people in power. In this case it's sort of religion, saying certain things are taboo or evil that aren't necessarily evil. It's just that they're misunderstood or it's been warped over time in a lot of cases. The same sort of idea happened through Sorcery of Thorns back then when it was with demons. This time it's with spirits. So if you liked those elements of Sorcery of Thorns, I think that you will like this one as well. The other things that I really enjoyed we're going to be talking about later, as well as some of the little nitpicky issues that we had, so I can talk about those in more detail, but I really enjoyed it. If you're looking for a new YA fantasy to start, I'd recommend this one. I do.
I'm not the biggest YA fantasy reader, and I'm gonna say that to you of like, yes, this is definitely a good one. Usually when I'm seeing YA fantasy, I like send them over to Gretchen because that's usually her niche, but this one was definitely a really good one. Highly recommend.
I also rated this book about 4 stars. I think on Storygraph it's technically 3.75, but whatever. I think the major push behind my rating is that like there were so many good things in Sorcery of Thorns, but they weren't executed like 100%. And I feel like Vespertine was such a good pick for us for our second chance book because it, like Michaela says, was an improvement on those things. In particular, the characters and the characterization, just fantastic. I will have more to say about Rogerson's world building, but again, that is hard to do in YA fantasy. Some people just don't do it well at all. She does it really well, and that's really excellent. Yeah, I wouldn't say that this book completely like blew me out of the water, but if you're looking for a very solid book, I was also, as Michaela was talking, was making me think of Soul Swift by Megan Bannon, which is also one that discusses like truth and religion in really interesting ways, and it's just a good fun time. Soul Swift is less of a fun time, but it's an interesting book. If you're not looking to cry at the end, Vespertine is the book for you. If you are, I reviewed Soul Swift a couple of years ago. Go check that out.
I just wanted to come out and say that one of the big things that really made this book stand out for me from a lot of other YA fantasy is the distinct lack of romance. There was some light flirting maybe, but there was no love interest, like dedicated love interest. There was none of that, like there's a war going on and we're kissing, which always bothers me. Like every single time I'm like, why are you kissing? There's things going on. This book 100% focused on friendship relationships and the relationship between Artemisia and the Revenant, and 100% down for that. I did not need the romance in here. That might be a turn off for some people because I know that one of the things they really like in YA is the fact that there usually is a very strong romance element to it. But I 100% am behind the lack of it in this book. I think that that's perfect. It was done well. There was much more interest in any way in the plot that was going on and less so in the romance that was happening. So yeah, 100%. I'm down for the fact that there was like basically no romance in this book. It was great.
One of the great things about Rogerson's books is that as they are often standalones, fantasy, she has this really amazing ability to hit a really good balance of information and action. And Michaela and I also discussed this with Year of the Reaper, which is why fantasy standalones, no matter what level, genre, whatever, are really difficult because you have to build a brand new world up from the bones. But you also can't have it take over the entire book, be manageable, be understandable, and be interesting. And so one of the things that, again, was good in Sorcery of Thorns, and I think is definitely improved upon here with Vespertine, is a world in which, you know, in one book, you have a broad idea of this world, its religion, its power structure, the people in it, how it functions, you know, what's gone wrong, how the people think, but you don't ever feel like you've been punched in the face with world building, which is super annoying and often makes books feel really slow or clunky. This book just rumbles right along, but you never feel lost or confused really. You understand what's going on and what is happening and what's important. And whether or not it's this book or another one of her books, I think for a genre that is often very bloated in its world building, just fantasy in general, she's a really good marker of how to really balance that well. And I enjoyed it in this book. The thing about this book that I didn't realize until I was adding it on Goodreads is that this is the first book that she has written that is not a standalone, which is fascinating by the way that it ends, because I feel like if you wanted to read it as a standalone, you could. There are clearly adventures to be had, and I absolutely want to spend more time with Artemisia and the Revenant. Again, their relationship is just the most magical part of this book for sure, but I didn't realize it until later. So not really a cliffhanger ending, but apparently more to come. So this is the first time she's ever done that, so we'll see how that goes.
On things that were improved upon in this book versus Sorcery of Thorns, one of my favorite characters in Sorcery of Thorns is kind of the demon, basically, in Sorcery of Thorns. In that world, he's basically kind of a butler to the wizard character because he's in a pact with the wizard character. Like, that's how he gets his magic, is by making pacts with demons. And that demon is really interesting because he's like, I'm not human. If you don't have a pact with me, I would 100% slaughter all of you immediately. But he also is shown to be like a very father-like figure in that character. And it feels like disingenuous there of him saying like, I'm not human and I don't have human characteristics, but he's like a very sweet father-like, like it was kind of disjointed. We kind of have that reflected again in this book with the Revenant, who is again a non-human character, but we do get the feeling like the Revenant is kind of morally gray. We can see partially from the way that he inhabits Artemisia, his thoughts a fair amount of the time, and when he is in control and has power, there is this like nature or pull that he has to like just kill things because that's like what he's supposed to do. And while he does have this human nature thing, it's more so pulled from interacting with humans and not something that is inherent to his character. So we get that more morally gray characterization and we see it, the element of him to be more animalistic and go towards carnage, as well as the I don't want to do that because I care about this person that is my friend, and that relationship between them is very important and also shows some plot stuff that's going on. And just overall, when it comes to characterization, this book is much stronger. I feel like I don't remember a single side character from Sorcery of Thorns, although there had to be some, whereas there are several like side characters in here that have friendship arcs and also just like arcs in general that are very interesting, and they feel more like people and characters in their own right versus like stand-in prototypes of like a generic fantasy character that you would interact with in the world. There's a friend that she was kind of enemies with, like her old roommate when she was training to become a nun, that gets to come back and sort of you get to see her other sides of her and her characterization. There's a soldier who is having PTSD issues because he got taken over by a ghost in a battle, and she sort of empathizes with him, and you get to see him struggling with that element of it. Like, these are characters that have things that happen to them outside of the plot of the story, and you kind of get to see how that affects their characterization, and I think it was done much better in Vespertine than it was in Sorcery of Thorns.
So here's the thing about the ending, and this is a spoiler-free review, so I'm going to talk about this very generally, but the ending suffers because the rest of the book has that great characterization that Michaela was just talking about. Because there are so many interesting characters who, throughout the course of this one, 300 to 400 page book, like, the roommate, who are side characters but really get a lot of growth. The twist when you discover that the bad guy that it's been built up as is maybe not everything is as it seems, and how that twist occurs. As Michaela said, not really a twist, because obviously the character set up to be the bad person, like on page 2, is not, potentially going to end up that way. But the way that that twist is handled with a lack of characterization is annoying. Because I know from the book I am reading that there has been really excellent character development with side characters. And it was really funny because Michaela and I were talking about this, and she was like, well, it makes sense because this, this, and this. And I was like, absolutely, it makes sense when you say it. When you tell it to me, it makes sense. I'm not saying that logically it doesn't make sense. I'm saying that I never saw it. It is a perfect moment of show, don't tell. And even though we are told and logically understand how this plot kind of works, you didn't show me the character development, and so it feels a little bit emptier. So I feel like the ending could have been much more interesting had certain characters been fleshed out more, and it just stands in stark contrast to the rest of the book. So an ending can make or break a book. I don't necessarily feel like this one stuck the landing, and that is for me why it gets the rating that it does, honestly.
Just to give my devil's advocate to what Gretchen said, and it's probably the reason why I rated this slightly higher than she did, again, the twist ending of who we thought the bad guy was isn't actually the bad guy I saw coming, and I think it was telegraphed, so I don't think it was a true red herring, but it was definitely a red herring of like, this is the bad guy, and he's not the bad guy. I feel like the lack of characterization that was given to the actual bad guy comes from the fact that our protagonist had no access to that character up until the point where the twist takes place. And I was okay with that being the thing. I also understand Gretchen's gripe. I do feel like it would have been stronger had we had more glimpses of that earlier in the book. But I didn't have issue, like I didn't take offense to it in the same way that Gretchen did. So if you're a person who like can follow the logic and just be okay and kind of ride with it, it's not going to bother you. If you're someone that needs a little bit more characterization in that, totally understand. I get it. Gretchen talked about why that bothered her. But we are different readers and we take different things out of the book. So I just wanted to give my devil's advocate as to why I didn't take offense to that. And again, it's not a 5-star book, it is still a 4-star book, and I did sort of see that too. The ending was a little bit meh for me as well, but because of how great this one was compared to Sorcery of Thorns, I think that I would still really enjoyed it, and it's still a very solid book, and both of us I think are interested in reading the next book in the series when it comes out. Like, it was a pleasant surprise to learn that it wasn't a standalone, because, yeah, I would like to see more about this world and learn about the other Revenants, and hopefully see some of these side characters get to grow and be happy and do other things with their lives.
And that is why this is Betwixt the Books, and why this is a joint review, because we are different readers and we are allowed to think different things. And we want to show you that we have a difference of opinion, but because I get to close this video, I get to say, I wanted to feel it and I didn't, and she can't say anything because I end our videos. So we absolutely are interested in continuing to read this series and also just more of Margaret Rogerson's books in general. Again, you know, even though this one was better than Sorcery of Thorns wasn't bad. And I love when an author is clearly improving as you read their books. So we would still definitely recommend this book, whatever our feelings on the ending. We can't wait to read and review the next book in the series whenever that comes out and see how, you know, someone who normally does standalones tackles the series. And I'm sure we'll have potentially conflicting thoughts on that one as well. So thank you so much for hanging out with us if you have already read this book. And who do you agree with? Me or Michaela, or neither of us? Do you think this is a silly and weird argument? That's fine. Tell us down there and we'll talk to you. Thanks, guys. Bye.